Hello, Johnny London here once again, and this week I've got something for you that I've been looking forward to doing for quite a while now. I picked up this guitar before Christmas, a few weeks before Christmas, and it's been sat here ever since while I find time to make this video. Now, there's not much wrong with it. I've been looking for one for a while, and this one's in really good condition. But I did want to give it a little bit of a strip and a clean and sort of set it up to my liking. And while I've had it here and I've sort of been looking it over, I've seen a few other little jobs that need doing as well. So today I'm going to give it a good going over, and we'll have a little bit of a talk about it and look at it as I do all that. Now, apart from taking the strings off and giving the neck a clean and just cleaning everything up nicely, I also need to replace the bridge saddles. As you can see, a string's come adrift, and that's because one of the bridge saddles has cracked, so it's not gripping the string properly anymore. It's the type of bridge that it is. It's a Floyd Rose, and the string's just they're just sort of clamped up like that. So I've got a new set of saddles to go on. That I can do while I set it all up. I'm also going to have a look at the wiring for the pickups. In fact, I'm going to change one of the pickups. One of them isn't the original pickup, but the guy I bought it off included the original pickup, so I'm going to put it back to stock. And he said that his wiring and soldering wasn't very good, so I'll have a good look inside and sort of give that a bit of a tidy up. And while I'm at it, there's a little mod that you can do to these, because it's got what they call humbucker pickups. As you can see, there's like each pickup sort of two pickups. So the idea of that is being they sort of cancel out any hum. One's one way round and one's the other way round, magnetically speaking. But there's a little mod you can do. You can add switches to sort of cut out one of the coils to give you like a different sound and that sort of thing. There's one or two different ways that you can configure that. Obviously, I don't want to put any extra switches on the guitar itself, don't make any holes or anything, but where these controls go, you can replace those controls with what they call pull pots. And then you just pull, and then you've got the effect of a switch. So it'd be absolutely stock to look at, but then you just do that. You've got a couple of different sort of sound options to add to your arsenal while you're playing. So I've got quite a bit to do. So the first thing I'm going to do is just get cracking with it really and just strip it all down. This guitar has a locking nut. There are 3 hex bolts that keep the strings clamped tightly in place. The strings are clamped tightly at this end too, and once again I need a hex key to undo the retaining nuts. I'm pulling the strings clear, although I could have taken the retaining nuts right off. I undo the tremolo arm and begin to remove the back covers. I'm by no means an expert when it comes to setting guitars up, in particular not an expert with Floyd Rose tremolos, but I'll do my best anyway. These springs are very strong and they're quite tight too. I see they've put a larger brass block on there, which should help with tone and sustain, and it's also got this as well, which is a thing to help the tremolo turn to exactly the right position, I think, but we'll come to that all in good time. Now, while I'm here, I'm just going to have a quick look, as I've got the screwdriver. I want to see what state this is in, because he did say he wasn't all that good with the soldering iron, the guy who I got it off, who changed one of the pickups. So let's see what we've got. Oh my god. Well, I'm amazed it's even working. Unbelievable. So I've got the tremolo off and the springs, that all just falls to bits. Now I'm going to give it a nice clean. I'm using a light mineral oil. It'll clean the gunk off and rejuvenate the wood. Here I'm loosening the pickup rings or surrounds so that the pickups will come away freely. 4 screws on each. Now I'm disconnecting the pickup wires. I take the control knobs off too. After all, everything's got to go. Well, as you can see, that all came to pieces, no trouble at all. Let's see if it's as easy when it comes to putting it back together. In the meantime, I'm going to give it a bit of a clean up with the old trusty, and I'm nearly out of that one actually. Let's hope I've got another one. But I know I'm still going to be handling it and it'll get dirty again, but you know, just for the sake of it, get into the nooks and crannies while you can. While I'm at it, there's a very interesting feature to these guitars. What they are is they're a kind of super Strat. So if you imagine a Fender Stratocaster guitar, this one's sort of like souped up a bit. So you have humbuckers instead of single coils, which give a bit more output. You have 24 frets, which means you can get a bit higher up for the wiggly notes with you know, quite good fret access there. The body's a little bit more aggressively styled with a sort of flatter, slightly less contoured sort of look to it. And some of them you get from other manufacturers, do things like make horns really pointy and that sort of thing. And of course it's got what they call a reverse headstock, which was a sort of you know, heavy metal thing years ago. This is a late 90s guitar. But the main thing about it that drew me to it, I'd been reading about them on the internet for a while, and it's this. They've got what they call a through neck. That's a very nice thing to have. A lot of guitars will typically have a bolt-on neck. Or sometimes they'll have a glue-on neck, which is a little bit better. But this is probably the best, really. So it's a through neck, and what they'll have done is they'll have made the neck and the middle section of the body all out of one piece of wood, hopefully, and then glued the sides on. And there's nothing wrong with having the body made out of multiple sections of wood. That's typical. Nearly all manufacturers do that anyway. You'll see a guitar and it will have, you know, if you can see the grain through the finish, you'll see it has different wood usually. So they've done that, and obviously that takes quite a lot of work to sort of you know, sand that all smooth and work that all in, and it's usually a sort of feature you find on premium guitars. So for a budget brand like Squier to have that, that's quite an interesting thing. Anyway, on with the cleaning. Right, well that's the guitar all nicely cleaned up now to my satisfaction. Not that there was too much wrong with it anyway. So I think what I'm going to do now is start to refit things, starting with the pickups. So what I've just been doing there with my compass on my phone was just checking the polarity of these pickups. They should be such that you have a north on the outside and a south on the inside and a south on the inside and a north on the outside when you've got a pair like this. But in any case, I'm not going to go too far wrong because you can see how the wires are formed. They're ready to go back in like that. But that was just a little check that you can do to make sure that things are how they should be. There's quite a lot to these actually, you know, just for 3 or 4 wires and a few windings around some magnets. There's quite a number of different ways that you can wire them up, but we'll come to that once they're back in. I pass the wires through the holes between the cavities of the guitar. This pickup goes straight back in as it was. As I'm replacing the pickup that was fitted, I need to take the surround off and fit it back to the other pickup. It's just a couple of screws with springs. There he goes. I'll just pull that wire all the way through and screw the pickup surround back onto the body of the guitar with the 4 small screws. Well, that's the pickups back in, mechanically speaking at least. So next I'm going to put the switch pots in, which obviously I'll need to wire the pickups to. Now these are interesting because in my day there were 2 sorts of pots, potentiometers. There were A and B, and A meant linear and B meant logarithmic. And what that means is when you turn the control, most of the resistance is at one end or the other with the logarithmic ones, and with the linear ones the resistance is spread out evenly across the track. Now why would you want logarithmic ones? Well, the ear responds logarithmically to sound, so when you're doing audio type applications like this, most of the time it sounds more appropriate to use the logarithmic ones. They'll sound to the ear like they've got the smoother range of volume levels across them, whereas the linear ones, they'll tend to sound like nothing's really happening, nothing's really happening, nothing's really happening, and then it's all happened in the last little bit. So I ordered B for logarithmic because that's how things were in my day, but since I've googled it a bit more, things have changed now, so I have to get some more. A is now logarithmic. A stands for audio, which does actually make sense, but it's the inverse of how it used to be back in my day. So there you go. I've set the pot to its mid position, and as you can see, one end has the lion's share of resistance and the other end not so much. That's log. The pots came with 2 nuts each. I used the first nut to space the pot from the back of the guitar, and I used the second nut on the top of the guitar to tighten the pot up. Perfect. There's a washer too, and that goes below the top nut. I check the correct operation of the switches. Push the knobs on and check for smooth operation of the controls. Right, now what I think I'm going to do next is I think I'm going to put the tremolo on and put those new bridge saddles in and get it strung and just get it sort of roughly adjusted so I can play it before I do all the rest of the wiring. And the reason for that is I'm going to have a little bit of an experiment with the wiring. I'm going to try a couple of different things. I've worked out a couple of drawings that I can use to guide me as I go, and I'll try a couple of different ways of wiring these pickups and just sort of see what sounds best. So obviously need to have the thing in some sort of playable condition first. Now these are all actually a very subtly different size. They've got a very slight curvature to approximate the very slight curvature of the fretboard. Might not necessarily be absolutely identical, but it should be near enough. So that's the order that I want them in. Here I'm just disassembling the old components. As usual, it's hex keys. This is the part that had broken. Of course, I did see a couple of hairline cracks on these after I bought the instrument, and that's what prompted me to give these an extra tighten up to test to see if they were going to break or not, or whether it was just like a sort of, you know, defect in the casting. But no, they were hairline cracks, and one of them broke completely and another one's on the way. So let's get the new set on.
The new parts go on no problem at all. They're an exact replacement. There we go.
Right, that's sort of okay for now. Now, I'm definitely not, repeat, not an expert when it comes to setting the Floyd Rose bridge up, so I shall bumble along as best I can.
I decided to put the springs on next.
Probably everybody's screaming at me that I've done that the wrong way, but never mind. Right, so it's onto the strings now. Now these are a very interesting thing. Super Slinky by Ernie Ball. I've always used these, although sometimes I have strayed from the path and bought things like Fender bullets. I use 9s, and that's a measurement of the thickness of the smallest string in the pack. And I find any heavier than that and my fingers are too feeble to bend the strings properly. But 9s are pretty popular amongst guitarists. 9s or maybe 10s are the most common ones. So these are okay. Now I bought a bunch of these on eBay a while ago, and when I got them, the packs all looked a bit sort of diminished, kind of a bit sort of thin and a bit shrivelly. And I looked online, and you never guess what, it turns out that these are massively like copied, so nearly all the ones on eBay are actually just fakes, and they're only about a sort of quid or two cheaper than the proper ones. So I sent them back, I declared them as fake, and the seller gave me a refund instantly as soon as I said that, but I returned them anyway. And then bought some from someone that absolutely promised they were completely honest and 100% definitely genuine, and they were a couple of quid more a pack. And I've got these, and to me they do definitely look like the real thing. I had another unopened pack that I had from a trusted source, and they were the same. No sort of shrivelly cheapness in the packet, but very hard to tell otherwise, even alongside, you know, if you're not really sure. They're not identical, but they look similar. And I don't want thin, horrible stretchy strings that are going to go out of tune all the time and probably rust and snap and all the rest of it. So I mean, it's just one of those areas that, you know, this is a bit of a faff to do, and I don't change strings very often on instruments, so when I do, I want to put proper ones on, don't I?
E, A, D, G, B, E string. I don't really like to have to do this, but I need to cut my balls off. The ball ends of the strings, I mean. That's just how this bridge is.
I had to chock the bridge up with something to get access, of course, to the Allen key tightener up things here, because I've already put the springs on the back and it's pulling it down. Probably I should have done it the other way. I'm sure somebody will let me know, won't they? But it's getting the job done anyway. That's the main thing.
I work my way up through the string gauges, cutting the balls off as I go. The string ends just clamp in there, you see. I pass the strings under the clamps of the nut. I could have taken the clamps off easily, but I chose to leave them on. less bits to lose. And the strings go into the holes of the pegs.
I've been using a thing called a luthier's knot today. When you come to wrap the strings around the posts of the tuning pegs at the end there, all it involves is like sort of wrapping the string round over itself a little bit. You can Google it and find a proper guitar person to show you how to do it. I've never done them before, and on this particular guitar it's probably not that important, because once it's in tune you lock down the nut at the end anyway, so all the sort of string tension becomes, you know, contained in there. So, but I just thought I'd do it for a bit of practice and, you know, something different. Right, so at this stage the whole guitar's sort of been cleaned and put back together. Pickups are adjusted roughly to the heights that I want them. Strings are adjusted roughly to the heights that I want them. There's adjustments either side on this bridge for raising and lowering it, but they're approximately in the right place and it's approximately in tune. I've still got to do the intonation, which is the thing where you move the bridge saddles back and forward a little bit to ensure that when you get to 12th fret it's exactly an octave from the open string. So I'll need to have the electronics all working in order to do that, because I'll need to use the guitar tuner to monitor, you know, get it exactly right. Don't want it just roughly in the ballpark. It sounds alright, but it's probably out a little bit. So a lot of fine tuning still to do, but of course there's an elephant in the room first, and that is the electrics. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just start doing these electrics now, so I can wire up the jack socket to the switch and sort of tone and volume, and then what I'll do is I'll have another little bit of a sit and think about which way I want to try doing these, and then start hooking them up, and then I can take it in the other room and play it and hear what my various combinations of wiring sound like. So that's the next thing. Everything's looking good, all the sort of tricky stuff's done, and there's just a bit of soldering to do now. And there we have it. Now it's another day as I speak to you, thanks to the magic of TV, and what I've done, I've sort of tacked all the wires together, had a little bit of a play, found out what sounds I wanted, how I wanted this to be wired up, and I've gone ahead and done that, and that's all nice and neat now. Now in the end I didn't have too many options. The pickups that are in there are not like the one that I was replacing. This one has got 4 wires, so if you imagine there's 2 pickups, you've got a wire coming out of each end, and with that you can basically put those wires in parallel, in series, one flipped round compared to the other, any combination that you can imagine. But the stock pickups that came with the guitar have just 1 wire at each end, so at one end of one pickup, one end of another pickup, and then there's just a common wire in between. Now I could have turned that from a 3-wire pickup into a 4-wire pickup by undoing the tape around the pickup, getting down to the very, very delicate wires inside there and trying to sort of rejig them and solder them. But I thought, you know what, I'm going to muck the whole things up, aren't I, if I tried doing that? So I'll run with what I've got, and in any case that gave me what I wanted. I've managed to do it so that I've got a coil split on each pickup, which gives a slightly thinner, brighter sound, and now everything's all nice and neat, and I can start, you know, really putting it back together and making the final adjustments.
Well, it's a bit of an improvement on how it was before. I put the cover back on the control cavity, and the cover back on the trem cavity. Getting there.
Now this next bit is a bit of a faff. It's the intonation, which I spoke to you about earlier. What I have to do is I have to get the strings so that they tune, that when you play open, I don't know if you can just see on there, that's in tune, and you go to the 12th fret and play it, that should be exactly an octave as well. Now the way to adjust those is to move the bridge saddles back and forward. So what's happening is the sort of second part of the string, when you've fretted it, has to be longer or shorter to make the pitch of that part of the string higher or lower. And unfortunately with this bridge, the only way that you can adjust it is by loosening off the Allen keys that hold the saddles in place. But when you do that, of course, because the string's under tension, the whole thing's just going to move forward to its maximum position, so you can't do it like that. You have to slacken the string off. So you measure it like this, slacken the string off, estimate how much the saddle needs to move back or forward, adjust it, tighten it up, retune the string, and then see if you've got it right. So it's literally successive approximation until you get to where you want to be. Now with these saddles, typically on a guitar, there's a pattern. The one on the high E will be sort of quite far forward, and the next one will be behind that, further out away from the neck, and the next one down will be a bit further still. And then the one after that, the D string, that will be a little bit more forward, and the next one back a bit more, and the next one back a bit more. So you'll see 3 staggered and 3 staggered again. It's not always the case, sometimes it turns out differently. Obviously just go by that, but that will give me an idea, so it won't be too much of a shot in the dark, but I do anticipate a certain amount of faffing about.
I've tuned the string correctly for when it's open, but when I try the 12th fret, it's a bit high. So now I slacken off the strings so that I can make my adjustment. Loosen that off. Push the saddle back with something, in this case a flat bladed screwdriver, to where I think it should be, and then retighten. Now I'll make a start on the next pair of strings. Of course I have to loosen them right off first. I'll repeat my adjusting procedure and then tighten up that nut. Then of course I have to tune the strings back up again. And here I am checking the open string against the octave. That's good. More tuning and checking, and if it seems like a faff, well, that's because it is. But I'm making progress. I'm happy with that. Now the nuts at the headstock can be tightened.
Well, that went a lot better than I thought it was going to. I just used that little technique that I said about of putting the saddles one behind the other for the first 3 and the same for the second 3. I actually did the 2 strings at a time because the locking nuts have, well, one locking nut for each pair of strings, so it just seemed easier to do it like that rather than slacking everything off all in one go. And that worked out no bother at all. Everything's nicely intonated. Now I always do my intonation so it's the open string and fretted at the 12th fret, but some people say that you should just put your finger on top of the 12th fret where the string is, and without actually pressing the string all the way down, and that will give you the harmonic, and that's a more accurate way of doing it. But you know, I've checked it both ways and it's both fine. And another thing to remember with these, of course, it's a floating bridge, which means anytime you do anything to one string, it will affect the tuning of the other strings. Even if you fret a string, it will ever so slightly affect the tuning of the other strings. So anyway, I've got it so that I'm perfectly happy, and of course everything's done and wired, so that really is pretty much this guitar finished. Now I think the thing to do now is go and give it a bit of a play. Well, that was a bit of fun, wasn't it? But what are my thoughts on this guitar? Well, it's obviously a budget instrument. Squier are well known to be Fender's budget line, but they've really put quite a bit of care and attention and a bit of thought into this guitar. It's not gone all the way over to being what you'd call a sort of proper heavy metal instrument, although of course with twin humbuckers and a Floyd Rose, you know, that's really a strong part of the recipe. It's got quite a flat radiused fretboard again and a fairly slim neck. It's pretty much a kind of Strat neck, maybe just a little bit thinner, not as thin as an Ibanez or anything like that. They've used a very nice wood on that fretboard as well. It won't be ebony, but it's a really nice piece of dark rosewood, which is always something that attracts me to a guitar if it's got a nice fretboard. And they've kept it pretty minimal, a volume, a tone and a three-way pickup selector switch. So I mean, it's there to be played, isn't it, really? It's not for faffing about with, it's for getting on and doing a job. And to that end, if you can pick a good clean example up for the sort of money I did, really you want to be sort of just under the 200 quid mark as I speak in 2023. If you can get a good one, and there's plenty of them about, then, you know, if you think that might be your bag, why not go for it? In the meantime, I'm going to go and give it another little bit of a run for me money. See you next time.